Very important legislation that will guide the the next decade of technology opportunities. The first one is the DPDP, which has been passed, and the next, which we will soon start consultation on, is the Digital India Act. You certainly can't see the government going to a terrorist and saying, "May I get your consent, please, before I see your personal data?" Or during an earthquake, if I'm a patient trapped in an earthquake and my blood group needs to be found, I can't have the government going and saying, "Can I get your consent to see your blood group?"
What I'm hearing is that people are looking across the world to look at following and replicating something from here.
The internet today is not just about editors and journalists, it's also about the hundreds and crores of citizens that use internet, and their rights are as important as every other right.
Sir, first and foremost, congratulations. Finally, after so much of talk which has been happening forever, now we have a new data protection bill. Tell me and tell us about this.
No, so I think the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill,
Yes.
the DPDP,
Yes.
And I like repeating that DPDP because for several years and almost a decade, when people around the world and in India as well spoke about privacy legislation, they talked about GDPR, which is a European bill. And I'm hopeful that after this bill has been passed, that the general conversation around the world will be around the DPDP, which is the benchmark. At least that's what we believe in strongly. Look, the journey for this, as you know, started way back in 2010 and during the UPA government, when there was an attempt for them to build the Aadhaar, but there was a lot of personal data of a lot of citizens floating around. And in 2010, I, as a member of parliament, moved a private member's bill where I said privacy must be protected. The government of the day, of course, was not too concerned about those issues and didn't bother. Then me and a few other people, including Justice Puttaswamy, went to the Supreme Court in a PIL. And that matter got opposed by the government of the day. And then in 2017, the Supreme Court ruled that privacy is a fundamental right.
Yeah.
And fortunately, Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji was in government by that time, and he quickly gave a direction that we should create a legislation that is mirroring what the Supreme Court said. And in 2018-19, we had the first draft. And unfortunately, and I was deeply involved in that draft when it was referred to the parliamentary committee. It was referred right in the middle of COVID, or just before COVID. And so 2 years was spent slightly, let us say, stop and start kind of a thing. It wasn't really like a fluid, clear process. And what came out of committee was a very complex, put together legislation. So therefore, the Prime Minister said, let's go back to the drawing board. Fortunately, by 21, when we requested him, could we take it back, I had also joined his team. And I was in the Council of Ministers. And then we worked hard all the way from 2022 now. And we have what we think is a very global standard legislation. It's the first of two very important legislations that will guide the the next decade of technology opportunities. The first one is the DPDP, which has been passed. And the next, which we will soon start consultation on, is the Digital India Act. So these two will be, from a Prime Minister's vision point of view, almost the two building blocks.
Yeah.
And this particular legislation is the one that creates the framework of rights for the citizen in terms of data protection and privacy. So I think it's a very important legislation. It will create a big behavioral change in how platforms deal with the personal data of Indian citizens, both government and private. And it will put a brake, I like saying this, on the practice of some platforms to misuse and exploit personal data, which is going on around us.
Yeah.
And it'll put a sharp brake on that practice and create a much more symmetric relationship between the citizen whose personal data is being processed and the platform that process the personal data.
There's also a lot of questions
of course.
that government is now going to be becoming more powerful and they'll surveil us.
No, look, I think I love any debate and I love people who are informed about facts to engage with us, and we did a whole series of consultations before we did this bill.
Yeah,
so
you
this bill
told. Yeah.
This bill was not done because I thought we need to do this bill, or 2-3 other people sat down and did it. There was a lot of consultation with a lot of very smart people, lawyers, judges, citizen groups, companies, startups, and that is how we came up with this bill. Now, for people to say today that there are government exemptions or there will be a surveillance state, my response to them is either you haven't read the bill, in which case that's fine, please do read it and then we can have a debate. And the second is, if you've read it, then let me explain to you that every exception that has been given to the government has been a very narrow, very well-defined exception in conditions like national security, pandemic, earthquake. So if you think that these three are not realistically narrow exemptions, you certainly can't see the government going to a terrorist and saying, may I get your consent, please, before I see your personal data, or during an earthquake, if I'm a patient trapped in an earthquake and my blood group needs to be found, I can't have the government going and saying, can I get your consent to see your blood group? So if you look at this bill from a real practical framework, with an open mind and with no conspiracy theories that are fueling your thinking, you will find that there is absolutely very reasonable exemptions that are lawful and that are needed for the government to do things for their citizens during a pandemic, during a national security emergency, or during an earthquake.
We say that our richest thing is the data, that we are so many of us, and we've seen a lot of companies make use of this data.
Absolutely. I think if you cut through the noise and the static and the sort of posturing by some people about this bill, and you get to the substance of this bill really creates a framework of enshrining what the rights of a normal citizen is. You and me are educated, but there are many lakhs and crores of Indians today. 120 crore Indians will be on the internet by 2025, 26. There are 84 crore Indians today. They are not as literate as us. They are not as advanced and capable in terms of their own rights as us. And this bill creates a framework to protect all of their personal data from being misused and exploited. So while some absolutists may have some problems with this, which is fine, because this is, the Supreme Court has very clearly said this is a fundamental right, not an absolute right. There will be some restrictions, and we have carved out those restrictions in a very reasonable, open, transparent manner.
There's this statement by Editors Guilds of India, and they say that journalists will also be media people under surveillance.
Where is it written in the whole bill? That's what I say. Don't believe. The first rule of the internet is don't believe everything on the internet. The second rule on the internet is make sure the facts are checked before you subscribe to it. No, there's no such thing. The fact is that your privacy and my privacy are things that need to be protected. This bill protects it. Because a third person masquerades as a journalist or is a journalist doesn't mean he or she has a free pass to your personal data. That certainly is not. And in the case there is a journalist who goes ahead and violates the personal data and he is sent a notice, he can always have a defense saying that this is for journalism and that you have not caused you any harm. And if the person whose personal data he is writing about is a crime or is a criminal or does something bad, certainly he is not going to be coming after you and saying कि आपने मेरे स्विस बैंक के अकाउंट के बारे में लिख दिया लेकिन वो मेरा पर्सनल डेटा था, लेकिन अगर है तो वो है. So I think the Editors Guild in particular, with great respect to all of the members there, have been wrong repeatedly on many issues that are very important issues that we need to be talking about, not with a dogmatic sort of rigid framework, but to understand that the internet today is not just about editors and journalists, it's also about the hundreds and crores of citizens that use internet, and their rights are as important as every other right. And this bill makes no attempt to breach anybody's fundamental rights. As a matter of fact, it strengthens it.
What would you say for startups? Because there's some phenomenal companies like PhonePe and all that were built on the back of the UPI, right? And so what are some of the opportunities that startups can look at?
And this bill is very important for startups to particularly be aware of, because this bill does what seems to be three very contradictory objectives: protecting the citizens' rights, making sure startups and innovation companies in this economy can continue to grow and expand with minimum compliance, and third, give the government these emergency access requirements. So three seemingly contradictory objectives are all being made possible by this bill. So that is one of the unique aspects of the bill. Second is, like I said, one of the defining features of this bill versus the earlier version of the bill, or indeed the GDPR, is that this, to protect the citizens' rights, doesn't create a huge compliance burden on startups. It doesn't say that you have to then keep going to government offices and filing repeated forms just to make sure that citizens are protected. We've made the compliance framework without diluting the citizens' rights very easy, very simple, very light touch. And so, and plus, we have also created a provision that for certain early stage startups, we will exempt them for a certain period till they become bootstrapped to a certain scale.
Yeah.
So the government has that power as well. But what startups must understand is clearly that there is a law that makes it very, very clear to everybody, including a startup, that there are rules by which you have to deal with citizens. And those rules are very simply prescribed in this bill. The principles are simply put in this bill. But that is something that startups must now understand. Those rules relate to consent. You have to seek consent before you seek any data. The data should be the minimum required for the business or the service that you are delivering. The data in turn should be used only for the purpose that you've taken it for.
Yeah.
And the fourth is you cannot keep the data beyond the service that you deliver. So storage limitation. So there are some broad, let's say, playground rules that did not exist before the bill that are now being created in a little bit of a guidebook for startups. They are easy for them, especially those who do ethical businesses. They're easy to align to and harmonize their business models. Those who are doing gadbad, this bill is certainly not designed for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I somehow feel that we have misused our data very badly also.
And I don't want to say names and so on and so forth. There are some companies, or many companies as the case may be, who have certainly made it their business model or built their business model around exploitation and misuse.
Yes.
And that I have said very candidly, that is very clear as the government of India, that we are putting the brake on that. We are putting a stop to that. And so if any company has said that मेरा पूरा मॉडल ही किसी के पर्सनल डेटा का मिसयूज करना है, उसका तो धंधा बंद.
सर एक सिंपल क्वेश्चन है, अगर कोई फोन करे मुझे कि अरे ये बेचना है या कोई सर्विस बेचना है तो वो भी इलीगल होगा?
देखिए, the way this will work is on day zero. So there is a period of transition we will give.
हाँ.
So the day zero when the law goes into effect, every data platform, every internet platform that has personal data that it has collected in the past must inform the citizen. Ki, Shradha, I have your data. Do you want me to keep it and consider that I have your consent, or do you want me to delete it? So you have the right as a citizen to, at 0.0 or 0 day or 0 hour, for your data to be all considered as either not there or there with consent.
Yeah.
Now from that day onwards, if somebody suddenly calls you and says, I am calling from so-and-so, I have your telephone number and do you want something, then you can certainly find out who has your data and who has leaked that data. And all you need to do as a citizen is simply send an email to the Data Protection Board, which will be a platform, and they will in turn send a notice to the platform who has your data. So there is a culture of accountability that will come for whoever is collecting the data. What was there before, ki I have collected your data, I don't mind, I give it to my cousin, I give it to my uncle, kisi ne pooch liya, I give it to them, and it doesn't matter because I just gave it to them, I sold it. That all comes to an end. That's why I said a deep behavioral change.
It's very
big. It is like it is no longer I have your data. It is now the feeling or the perception will be I'm a trustee of your data.
Yeah.
You have trusted me with your data, and trusting me with your data means that I have to hold that data in trust.
Yeah.
So that is the change, and it is my hope that when the bill goes into effect after the transition period, there will be less and less of this practice of people sort of sharing personal data. ठीक है, मेरा database ले लो.
Yeah, I'm smiling because we have all been so hassled because of this.
Yes. No, it
You
is.
said rightfully it's a behavioral and I think business cultural change.
Absolutely. So I use the word behavioral because it's easier for people to understand. If I start getting into culture and business and so on and so forth, behavioral change is that you will do what is right.
Yes.
And you will not do what is wrong.
Yes.
And the right and wrong in a lot of ways has been defined in this bill.
Yeah. I also read today article, there is a critique on the bill and one of the things is that government is keeping it self-exempted from, like what the RTI bill has been changed. And
There are two issues here. Both of them unfortunately are wrong. And I think some people, to be politically relevant, because if you're in the opposition, you certainly will not be relevant if you say acha bill hai. So you have to dig something and you will look for something that is obscure and confusing and use that as a basis. So that's no problem. On the issue of government exemption, there is no exemption for the government. If I as a government come to you and take your data and I leak the data, the data is breached from me, I am as liable under the Data Protection Board to be levied a penalty. So there is no two standards for a private company who is a trustee of personal data or a government platform that is a trustee of personal data. They are both going to be looked at by the Data Protection Board, and if one has breached or the second has breached or both have breached, they will both be levied the same type of penalty. And it is because of that understanding that we have and the Prime Minister has created a data governance policy for the government, so that every government department and every government ministry also protects the data, manages it with due care. तो ये हमने पहले ही सोचा हुआ है, and so we are doing that. So that exemption story is a false story. The second is RTI. Now this is again taking a half fact and trying to cook it into some full fiction, which is that there is no change or amendment to the RTI. The RTI, Right to Information Act, says that if somebody is in public life, that whatever has to be disclosed on the RTI, people should be able to get him to disclose. So I'm a public servant. If you want to know what my assets are, where I live, what my address, all that is fine. But you can't go now use that as a free pass to find out what my blood group is, what my illness is, what my children are doing. That is what we have said, that right to personal data also it protects those in public life.
yeah.
I mean, just because tomorrow, Shradha, you decide to go into politics, doesn't mean that suddenly you are, it's open season for everybody to ask you the most intimate and personal details of so therefore, all we have said is right to information is not the same as right to personal information.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, because there's no limitation to personal information.
So therefore, it can't be anybody's case that right to information ke naam pe my personal right to data protection gets violated.
Yeah.
So whatever is under the law for a public servant to disclose, whether it's assets, whether it is conflict of interest, whether it is family's business, all of that is fine. That will continue to be disclosed.
Yeah. But sir, the biggest, I would say, success of this, and it's of course very early, it's just very early days, is that, what I'm hearing is that people are looking across the world to look at following and replicating something from here.
No, so look, I want to be the first one to tell you that this will not be without challenges. ऐसा कोई smooth ride वैसा नहीं होगा. Nothing in the tech world can be predicted in terms of what will be the road bump, what will be the challenges, what will be a new scenario that we have not envisaged. So we expect these bills to keep evolving.
Yeah.
We see the world in a particular way today. We have constructed with consultation a bill and a framework and an architecture. But I am the first one to tell you that maybe even 1 year from now, 2 years from now, there may be some new rules that we may need. We may not have anticipated some new challenges that will emerge, maybe from the AI segment, maybe from Web3, whatever.
Yeah.
And that we may need some new type of modified rules for it. So we have created a framework, but we recognize that the world of tech and the world of innovation is a space that will constantly throw up newer and newer scenarios, and we are equipped for that. That is why the bill is designed to be an evolvable bill.
Yeah.
It's a future-ready bill.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I would say congratulations. And then to all of us in the country, because somewhere, as I said, it establishes कि हमारा data protected है.
And I think also
Value hai.
yes, no, it is valuable. It is protected. It is a right of Indian citizens to have the data protected. And I think more than all of that, and that those are all important, we are also today showing to the country and the world that we have together, citizens and governments and consumer groups and industry all work together to create a very important building block for the future of tech economy.
Yeah.
So the difference between our approach, our government's approach and Prime Minister's approach is that we don't want to legislate because we want to legislate. We want to legislate what people want us to legislate.
Yeah.
And say, well, this law, this bill is as much the creation of all of those who participate in the stakeholder consultation.
Yeah.
The smart, the not so smart, the normal, the not so normal, everybody, opinionated, not so opinionated, everybody, excepting the Editors Guild who did not participate. But all of them participated and have given their contributions to this bill. So this is truly, in my opinion, the first time that we are creating, at least in the tech space, a legislation for the people, by the people, of the people.
You're like championing the semiconductor story of India.
Yes.
And it's important because again, next 10 years, we just can't ignore the semiconductor story. So if you could tell us some of the things that has been done.
No, both electronics and semiconductors in a way are intertwined.
Yeah.
And the simple narrative of this is, it's pretty clear from even if you're not in public life or even if you're not in business, that the rate or pace of digitization of our lives is only increasing.
Yeah.
There is no person in the world today, no person in India today who's not behind an Insta Reels or a YouTube and therefore has a smart device, and therefore the smart device is connected to a cloud which needs a lot of servers and data centers, and therefore is connected to the internet and requires routers and all of that. So there is now, it is clear that India, especially India, which is the largest connected nation in the world with 83 crore Indians on the internet and 120 crores shortly, that the consumption of digital products is only going to go up.
Yeah.
And we are the fastest growing market, most exciting market. In 2014, there was little or no production of anything.
Yeah.
And now we make almost all the mobile phones we consume. We export 1 lakh crores last year of mobile phones. And so Prime Minister's vision after rebuilding electronics and having this confidence is that we should also now look at the most important part of these digital products, which is the semiconductor.
Yeah.
And so his point is that as India becomes a trusted partner in the electronic supply chains of the world, we should also become a trusted partner and a sort of a strong partner for the semiconductor supply chains. And the policy announced was in 22 January. And in the last 15 months, we have progressed in a way that the last 70 years we have not seen.
Yeah.
And I like saying this to anybody who asks me why India has not done anything in the last 70 years. I said it's political ineptness, bureaucratic ineptness, and a lack of vision. I say it bluntly because there is evidence where companies came, wanted to set up in India, but could not.
Yeah.
Because we did not understand how important it was. So we are at a stage in the last 15 months, we have progressed. There are more than 30 design startups who are designing chips for the future. We have now announced almost $3 billion packaging unit in Gujarat from Micron, which is a very leading company. Soon setting up a semiconductor research center, which will be one of the world's finest research centers for the future of semicon. And this is the first year since the policy, and we've already got launched the plan with a brand new curriculum of training 85,000 PhDs, postdoctoral, masters and undergraduate students in material science, physics, electrical engineering, all the talent that's required for semiconductors. So we are well on our way, and I think it's a critical thing for India.
Yes.
And you can see that the US government and the Indian government, when the Prime Minister recently visited US, has signed an MOU with the US, which is like the holy grail of semiconductor, which is where I learned semiconductor, where all the great things of semiconductors has happened over the last 4 decades, has tied up with India. And so for the US to recognize India as a partner for the future of semiconductors, the future of AI, the future of high performance computing, and the future of the internet, is telling you how the world is looking at where our capabilities are.
Yeah.
Even if we didn't believe it for 65 years and we didn't see it, the world certainly is seeing it now. And I think semiconductors is certainly a very, very big area for our young Indians to innovate. I see a lot of startups coming up in this space, in design, in testing, in validation, all those areas. And it's a place where the Prime Minister has really put front and square as a priority area for us.
Yeah, I have to tell you that your office connects me to whichever startups you meet to tell, because we have now semiconductor startups, and I've been tracking the space. So this is like first time the last 1 year that I'm getting.
And the amazing thing for me as well is, I mean, you like this lady called Vrinda in Delhi who has a semiconductor startup that's doing all these cutting edge chips for drones.
I spoke to her.
Right. And she is in the White House, sitting with our Prime Minister, with President Biden. And while there is the Sundar Pichais and the Satya Nadellas and the Mukesh Ambanis and all of those big wigs in the room, you had the semicon industry being represented by this fine young lady who's building the chips for the future. So I was personally very, very excited with that.
Yeah, I can see the passion and the work that you've done, and that's why I just think that, because it's so very important, and thank you for also calling out that R&D is also a focus.
Yes, it's very important, because all of these areas that we are talking about, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, super high performance computing, supercomputing, automotive, IoT, they all require fundamental R&D.
Yeah.
And it's not just, it's innovation is important, and that's an important layer, and I think we are doing well, but fundamental research into what is really science and engineering, cutting edge, and every chip, I like saying, is like a cross section or intersection of the cutting edge of science and the cutting edge of engineering. So you have physics and you have electronics there. So it is very important that the next generation or the next batch of youngsters starts looking at all these areas. And I am, one of the things that I like to report as at least as a metric or an indicator, is that what electronics engineering enrollment used to be down in the last 5 years. I don't know if you know this.
No.
But in the last year, electronics engineering enrollment have picked up significantly. I'm not saying it is because of Prime Minister's policies or whatever, but certainly that electronics and semiconductors today represents a very exciting opportunity.
Absolutely.
That everybody has got. And so people are saying, fine, I'll look at Infosys and TCS as a job, but I'll also look at this as an option.
Yeah. And again, I have to tell you that, I've been tracking you like for last 1 year. I just see like every day there is something semiconductor in everything else that you're doing.
Non-stop. The Honorable Prime Minister has created a phrase called non-stop India. So for non-stop India, we have non-stop ministers, non-stop people in the government. So so it's a mission for us, and we are very excited to be contributing in some way to this vision of this new exciting India.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.